Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Kickball Podcast. I'm your host for today, Danny Lang, and today we have a very special guest, head coach of North Carolina Football Club over in USL Championship, Mr. John Bradford. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing well. I appreciate it, Daniel.
Of course, and I mean, I know we've been talking back and forth, and it's something that I've really been wanting to, just make sure I got the time to be able to talk with you. Just still be in school with finals and everything, not finals, but the exams and everything else coming up. But I mean, I'm thankful to be able to have the time with you today.
No, I appreciate it. And I don't envy your position of having exams and everything right now either.
So, I mean, looking at some, aside from the latest result with Miami, looking at these past few matches, you guys have gotten some early wins, and it's been a good start so far, at least in this Eastern section of championship. Tell me a little bit about what these first couple progressions, these first few matches of the 2025 season have looked like, just so we could hear from the man himself.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've kind of shown several different sides of ourselves, and none of it has been, I think, our best efforts, our best qualities yet, and I think part of that is just early stages of the season and continuing to find our way a bit. We've got a really good group, a positive group, a lot of good character within it, and we've also kind of let ourselves down in some of the most recent games in terms of how we've defended, how we've kind of lacked a little focus, and especially both sides of the ball, but. Yeah, I'm very excited about the group for the this year, and I know we're going to get there. And the good thing with some of these cup games and additional games is that you have a quick turnaround from one game to another. So the fact that we go to Miami and don't perform well and don't come away with a result that we wanted is positive in the sense that we can quickly get back on the field this Friday.
Right. And that's going to be a huge part, at least, of, I mean, I think, with the Jägermeister Cup now being championship and these League One teams on top of the Open Cup, which you guys just keep seeming to win too. I know there was a little bit of social media back and forth between some of the supporter sections. And I mean, I like, I like how North Carolina runs their social media. I think it's funny. I think it's new. I think it's fresh. But yeah, and then even going further with some of these Carolina rivalries, I know the next match. I believe it's yeah, I believe the next Open Cup match is Charlotte FC against this North Carolina side. That's going to be a whole other that'll be a whole other ordeal. About 2 weeks from now, it seems like May 6th, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it's good. Obviously, multiple competitions for our group to be able to compete in. And, we said at the onset we want to be competitive in everything that we do, whether it's the league, whether it's Open Cup, whether it's Jägermeister Cup. And it's I think good for our community, good for our club to be able to hold on to these rivalries that we've had with Independence and Charleston and other ones across different leagues, and now add a new one in Charlotte FC. And we played them in preseason this year and had a great crowd that came out, and I'm sure we'll do the same thing again when everybody comes out to watch on May 6th.
And there's just something about this Carolinas section of the United States. You don't quite have New York or Los Angeles, but you've got so many college teams, pre-professional teams, USL Championship, USL League One, MLS Club. I mean, South Carolina and North Carolina really are the states for soccer, in my opinion. And you having been a North Carolina guy yourself, I mean, tell me a little bit about what that was like growing up in these certain systems, going to Furman for college, and then obviously coaching at North Carolina. We'll get into a little bit more later, but what could you comment about as, what could you tell us a little bit about it now?
Yeah, I mean, I've gotten to the age now where I've got a lot of history and a lot of experience within North Carolina soccer, and grew up in Winston-Salem and was part of the Twin City Youth Soccer Association there, and also a fan of Wake Forest University and college soccer and being able to watch games. But just going through the younger ages of learning the other clubs in North Carolina, competing against teams in South Carolina and Virginia, going to all the youth tournaments that you go to and kind of get to know the history of the clubs that are there, allowed me to really have a fine respect for all of the clubs in our area and kind of the people that were behind them and keeping them going. And I was very fortunate to have good coaches, from an early age that were working with me. I could name drop all of them. But yeah, just really value the fact that I was fortunate to be around good people within the game at young ages, and then as it went on, and up into college and everything, playing at Furman and obviously within the conferences that are more regionalized and everything from a college standpoint. Like I said, it gave me a great respect for soccer in our area and in North and South Carolina as well.
Huge. Yeah, it's just something. I mean, so I'm a New Yorker myself, so I see a lot of this from afar, and it's something that I've taken really just a general interest in, having been around just the college game for a little while over the last 2 years, and then now working into the USL stuff and really getting a scope of this landscape. I mean, the Carolinas are just the spot to be. I think if you're really looking for grassroots, local, American, passionate soccer.
Yeah, well, and again, kind of the other part of my career, growing up playing and then getting into coaching and then, being in the Raleigh area and part of North Carolina FC, previously Capital Area Soccer League Castle for the last 20 years, basically, have just really grown the same appreciation for soccer in our area even more. All the great college programs, all the great clubs that are in our area, great high school programs as well, and it just seems like we're again fortunate to have a lot of good people in the soccer community around here.
So huge. And I mean, I was telling you a little bit before we started recording, I'm always big on the college game, and two of the additions to this NCFC squad has been Adam Luckhurst and Ahmad Alak from Duke and North Carolina respectively. So you got both sides of that, deeply rooted North Carolina history. But tell me a little bit about what the youth scene also looks like. Some of these new guys that are brought in also onto this squad. I mean, I know Patrick Hunter just made, or Patrick, excuse me, Patrick Burner made his debut, at least for NCFC. But then you've also got guys like Jason and Finn who are working their way up through this academy. I mean, it really does seem like top to bottom that NCFC knows how to bring these guys in, knows how to develop talent, but also creates a home for some of these players that have been here for the longer term.
Yeah, well, I think that's it. It's kind of a balance in terms of creating the roster and who we're trying to um, have as and give opportunities to. We on one side we have a very connected academy pathway to our first team, and we've shown that over the years of players coming in consistently for training, having opportunities to sign academy contracts, make professional debuts, and really impacted on that. And we like to think of ourselves as somebody that's developing talent to then move on to whatever's next for them, and staying with us for a while. But also having ambition to move to bigger and better and whatever that looks like. And then, like you said, having good connections and good relationships with the local colleges. We're super fortunate with all of the talent that's in our backyard in terms of the local ones, the Duke State Carolinas, and then just as it expands out of the state, Wake Forest and Wilmington and Charlotte and Greensboro, you just could keep rattling them off, all the quality programs that we're kind of involved in terms of player recruitment and like I said, good relationships with the coaches and can be aware when there's somebody that's somebody that they think we should take a look at. This morning I got a message from Tony Annan, who's the head coach of South Carolina, who I've known for a long time, and Tony's recommended a player that he saw on an international trip, and so anyway, it's usually people driven on how that happens, and I think with Adam and Ahmad, it's a very similar story of talking to Carlos at Carolina, talking to John at Duke and hearing about what they thought about these players and are they professional level and kind of getting their feedback and then giving the players opportunities. And both those guys came in for preseason this year. And to be honest, we were thinking about just signing one player is what we kind of had left on our roster budget and everything that goes into it. And both of them made a really compelling case, and I'm very fortunate that we were able to sign both of them. So yeah, it's a blend between all those guys, and like you mentioned, Patrick Burner, who's probably the most experienced player, even though he's not the oldest player, but just having played in League One in France for so many games and appearances that he's made, and then him wanting a different chapter for his family and for him to be able to come to the United States and provide that, and then blend it all together. Older guys, veterans, experienced guys, and then young guys like you mentioned, Finn and Quinta, that are doing great in the environment as well.
Yeah, I mean, it just I think you bring this perfect storm, this great environment all together, and you have different. I mean, and I think you could talk about this with a lot of professional environments, but you've just got so many different perspectives that all of these guys are able to learn off of. And again, I'm not saying anything new by just putting that out there and talking about this team, but I mean, it's also led to a lot of the success. And so one last thing I'll mention though too. Um, Rafa Mentzingen hit the March month that he's been able to have. I mean, how impactful has that performance or have those performances over the last few weeks been for the success that you guys have seen at least so far and potentially what's to come with growing with the rest of this team?
Yeah, I mean, I think Rafa's, he's a driven individual, and he came in very fit, very healthy, coming into preseason and this season, and he's got ambitions. He was part of the group that we were able to win the League One championship in 2023, and I think those guys that were with us in 23 that were part of the team last year in 24 are all highly motivated to okay, now we're in USL Championship, and we want to be successful and lift a trophy in this league. And so Rafa, he comes with the right attitude and works hard, and he's got a great impact on the field and then also in the locker room as well, with all the experience that he brings. But yeah, we're expecting continued success from him, and I know he's expecting for himself. And like you mentioned, the rest of the team. I mean, everybody just continuing to grow together more. And understand kind of each other's personalities and how we can affect the opponent together and that kind of thing. So, like I said at the beginning, it's a good group with positive energy, and I think that we have some ambition this year.
If nothing else, I think this is just going to continue to provide a great product for North Carolina fans as well to continue to be able to watch. And obviously, I think there is a high ceiling for this team and high expectation that you guys have got in that locker room. I don't want to go too far into it. I wouldn't want to be I wouldn't want to be prying about things that I've got no business knowing, but I really do believe that, like you're saying, there is a high expectation for this team, at least within this club. But I love hearing this conversation, at least from the head coach's perspective, because I feel like, this will end up going live onto everything else, and everyone who's watching is going to hear me talk about this a little bit, but I feel like I'm treated to a private conversation just about, how exciting that this team is going to end up being. But again, I'm done going on and on about that. I could go on every day. But so coach, I've driven a little bit of the conversation. I've got a lot of just the current information that I think everyone who's watching this and me personally would want to know, but I want to hear a little bit about your own journey. So I'll stop talking for a little while and I'll just leave you with anything and everything that you'd want to tell us about your journey through soccer from where it first started up until your coaching journey. I want to hear every bit of it, however long or short the story ends up being. But I'll leave it to you to tell us about your journey, sir.
Yeah, I think I would have to go back to people as being kind of the connecting thing that has taken me all the way through the journey. I mean, starting with, family and my older brother, who was a big inspiration in terms of when he was kicking a ball, then I started kicking a ball. My parents that are just like every other, youth soccer parents that were driving all over the place for practices and games and tournaments and all that kind of stuff. And like I said before, just the early opportunity to work with specific coaches that really impacted me. In Winston-Salem, we were fortunate to have a relationship with Wake Forest University, and when I was 11, the my head coach of my club team was John Hackworth. And Hack was had been playing at Wake Forest and was also getting into coaching, and now fast forward, he's been multiple Youth World Cups head coach, university head coach, professional head coach, all that kind of stuff. But so working with Hackworth at 11 years old, and then Karim Desser at U12, who's gone on to coach collegiately and professionally as well, and done scouting. Jay Vidovich at Wake Forest, was our ODP coach. Um, for the state team going forward. Jay Miller was our U17 national team coach, and so anyway, it's just this blend of all these coaches that had a great opportunity, and there was a consistency amongst all of them, even going to Furman University to play for Doug Allison. A big deciding factor when that was just his character and what I knew he was building, and the other people that were being recruited there. It was just a like-mindedness of positive action and that kind of thing. And coming back to getting into coaching after playing at Furman University and having success there. My assistant coach that was with me at Furman, Ryan Higginbotham, all of a sudden calls and just says, we've got an opportunity to go out to Texas and start coaching. I think you'd be good for this. Do you want to come? And I hadn't thought about coaching prior to that, and so at 20, whatever it was, moved out to Midland, Texas, with a friend of mine, Anthony Escobar, that I played with at Furman University, and Anthony, myself, and Ryan, started the West Texas division of the Dallas Texans, which back then was one of the biggest clubs in the U.S. Basically out of Dallas, but the idea of having satellite locations was kind of a new concept. So we were out in West Texas in high school football country, trying to learn how to coach and work there and playing in Dallas. So a lot of travel to the top leagues in Dallas and all that kind of stuff. And I was out there for 3 years with those two guys, and that was a great experience because we just were learning how to coach and how to affect youth soccer players and what works and what doesn't work. And we had a good situation set up to be able to kind of lean on each other and learn from each other and that kind of thing. And then when I was 2002, so 22, 23, came back to North Carolina, and was very fortunate. Again, it goes back to people, but to start back in Raleigh here with Capital Area Soccer League, and I knew coaches that I had before. Rusty Scarborough is one that's actually still coaching with the club, but he was coaching me at ODP and Region Team, and he was back at Castle. Jay Howell, Michael Milazzo, Bruce Talbot. These were all guys that when I played at Furman, a lot of those guys were assistant coaches at Carolina. And we had beaten Carolina 2-1, which I reminded them of course, in the College Cup in 1999, or the college playoffs. But anyway, those guys were at Capital Area Soccer League and was able to come back in as a coach, having had some experience in Texas, and really kind of work my way through each year of learning and growing as a young coach. And I don't think it's often that, somebody could start in the younger ages, and then just basically commit any kind of time that I had to volunteering to come out and work with older groups, not get paid anymore or anything, but just try to apply my craft, learn from everybody else, listen. And then as time went on, at first it was Charlie Slagle that was the head of Capital Area Soccer League that had given me opportunities, and Jay Howell is kind of the leader. And then over time it went to, like I said, Rusty Scarborough, and then Gary Butte, who's still the CEO at NCFC Youth. But throughout all this time, was able to be supported not only in my growth as a coach of coaching a youth soccer team, but also going to get licenses, and getting my A license when I was 27, having to renew that a few times, but then going for the academy director license, going for U.S. Pro license that I just finished this last year. Education has kind of been a constant for me of hand in hand. If you're learning on the field, you're learning from others, but then you also need to have a formal education, of how you're approaching the game, and you're learning from other people, kind of how things get set up. Um, and yeah, my opportunity with the professional team in 2012, I volunteered my time with the Carolina Railhawks, was what NCFC used to be. And I would come and just listen to Martin Rennie and then Colin Clark as the head coaches and just try to be a part of it. And part of it was me learning as a coach, and part of it was how can I better connect our youth program, our youth academy, to this professional team that's right here in town, that we haven't had a relationship with, and how do we grow that? And so that was 13 years ago, and over time, there's been just such growth and such opportunities that have been provided to our young players to come in, train, earn opportunities and that kind of thing. That was really great over a long span of time that I was kind of growing within our own academy program, playing in U.S. Soccer Development Academy and being competitive as a coach on the field, but also growing our academy program to have a South Division, and as well as our North Division to have a Del Sol program, that was great in terms of highlighting Hispanic talents that maybe didn't have another opportunity to get into formal club soccer, and then filtering them up into kind of what we grew as the Capital Area Railhawks Academy program, but then into, like I said, North Carolina FC Academy program. And in 2019, Dave Sarakin, who was the former men's national team coach, was named as the head coach of NCFC. And I was named as the assistant coach, with the idea being, let's formally, connect the academy and the first team together, and let's really help support movement in between those two things. And previous to that, I had spent 3 or 4 years as an assistant coach with U16 and U17 national team programs for U.S. Soccer, and had got to know Dave a little bit through that relationship and those opportunities. So all of a sudden I was now in the professional environment, having had international experience over the last couple of years in coaching, around the world against other national teams, and just learning again from the staff that was there. Sean Sekiris and Hackworth, were also guys that were head coaches kind of in those age groups I was working with, and just learned a ton from them, consistently, and just brought everything back to Raleigh and to our club, and just tried to help implement the things that made sense, try to stretch our club a little bit to be as competitive as we could be, and developing players and having ambition and everything that we wanted it to be. Then fast forward from when Dave, we went down to League One as kind of a club decision after COVID. And our owner kind of was certainly wanted to maintain the club and all that, but with the idea that we didn't know if there was going to be fans coming to games, you didn't know how much revenue you could have, that kind of stuff. And so Steve Malik, who's still the owner of NCFC, made the decision to go down to League One in USL, and even more so, what that forced was, everything was reduced in terms of finances and budgets and all that kind of thing. But it gave me the opportunity to be a head coach in a professional organization for the first time, and even more so connect our academy and the first team. Like we had games that year where we were starting 5, 16, and 17-year-olds, because that's what we had,
Right.
and going to try to be as competitive as possible. And for those players, unbelievable experience and opportunity for them, and they also respected it, and we tried to grow this respect from the academy program to the professional environment of what it takes to be a pro and that kind of stuff. And fortunate in 21 and 22 to give a lot of players their professional debuts and to work with a lot of youth talents, and a lot of great people. Nazmi Abadawi sticks out as a guy that was part of our group in 2019 and 2020 and had played for the club for years. But he stuck with it to continue to play in 2021. In kind of a lower league than what he was used to being able to play for. But had a young family that was being going to be started, and he and his wife were local, and so going through it, it was this blend of young talents that we're trying to help develop, and then kind of older players that had to be the right mentality to be able to compete in kind of a blend like that. So anyway, 21 and 22, we weren't successful on the field, but in terms of wins and losses, but we were extremely successful in terms of continuing to implement the connection between the academy and give youth players opportunities. In 2023, we made a club decision to be a little bit more competitive, and that aligns obviously with finances more so. And so we went from being the bottom budget of the league in League One to being about midway, and really went after a few guys that are still on the roster today to come in and help us in that year in 23, and Louis Perez and Mikey Maldonado and Rafa Mensigan and just to name a few of guys that came in and were able to impact in 23, and we had a really strong season. We were disappointed to not win the league in the regular season, but to win in the playoffs and to do it at home and penalty kicks against Charlotte Independence, the rival was kind of a storybook finish to that season. And then going up the championship last year, I thought we were competitive and okay, but never really consistent. And we made playoffs, and I think that was a positive achievement. But the entire group is hungry for more and that kind of thing. And so for me as a coach, it's kind of been this long journey of being very fortunate to be around such positive and supportive people that have allowed me to do multiple things, whether it's continuing education, whether it's going off the national team trips, and then having to cover my teams while I was gone, or to give me the responsibility of being named the academy director, or being an assistant coach in a professional environment, then the head coach, and now sporting director of our club as well. So I would be not in the situation I'm in now if there wasn't people there that were really supportive. And I know I named a lot. There's so many more to name that have been a part of that and continue to be a part of it. And then the other piece is, my wife and I met in 2006 in the club. I was coaching and she was one of the coaches in the age group I was coaching with. And then we got to know each other and started dating. And next thing you know, we're married. And then now fast forward and we've got a 14-year-old, a 12-year-old, and an almost 10-year-old, all of which that play in the club, on the various teams. And they go to our games every time they can. And then we all go to the NC Courage games every time we can. And, just have this unique situation where we're fully invested in a club. And I think that's what's kept me here and kept our family here. There's been opportunities over the years to go to other clubs and other situations, and we've always just kind of brought it back to what is the most important thing for us, and it's family and the people. And that's kept us in the area. So, I remain excited. A lot of people, I think, if you've been in the same role or same area or environment for a long time, you itch for something else. And for me, all I itch for is to have more success, here, and to have players that come and want to be part of something special and unique, and just try to help them in any way that I can. So, now it's with a great staff that we have. at the club, and that kind of has the same values that I try to have and that our players try to have. So, um, just very fortunate. So,
No, so thank you for the entire for the story. I mean, I mean, yeah, I think the main theme of this really was it just going back to family and the people that you've been able to forge these relationships with on the way. If you wouldn't mind, I got a few questions just about certain parts of the journey. I mean,
of course.
when you talk about creating a satellite area, your first coaching job back in the early 2000s, and this being on the western side of Texas, I believe you mentioned, in high school football country. I mean, tell me about the process of getting that kind of thing started. What were the ideas behind that? And I mean, how much of a launch pad must that have been really to the rest of your career in hindsight?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the biggest thing that it was it kind of, like I said, it gave us the opportunity to go to talk, how to design training sessions as a group of young coaches, and then go and implement them in a very safe, open environment on how to do it, because it was very new. Like I mean,
Right.
a lot of the players that were playing out there were talented players, but there wasn't a formal, youth soccer club to the degree of the Dallas Texans that had been out there. And so it became something that we kind of, had this openness of learning and trying to start something, and it just kind of built our own confidence. I think we became better as coaches and trying things and failing and trying things and being successful and seeing what worked and what didn't. But I mean, it was a culture difference. I was used to youth soccer in North Carolina and you know the other areas that I think had prominent youth soccer and that kind of stuff. And this was a different mindset from these families. For like we would have practice. Um, and all the dads of the players would come to the practice and they would sit inside the field, with a cooler, and they'd sit on the beer on the
Right.
field drinking a beer, just watching their kids, and just totally into it. And there was an intensity about it and that kind of stuff. But we were kind of going, okay, we have to shape the culture that we want here a little bit. Um, we want there to be this involvement, but how do we do it in a way that maybe is not making each player feel like either mom or dad or somebody is just right on top of them and all over them. But there was a lot of that feeling in Midland and Odessa, based on high school football and obviously the history and everything that's come from there. So we also wanted to tap into it a little bit more. Have some passion and have some competitiveness, which is fine, but then do it in a positive way and something that we could make sense of. But yeah, I mean, getting that club started, from a Dallas Texans standpoint before there was FC Dallas or anything like that. I think that it was just growth of the club. Hassan Nazari is still the head of Dallas Texans, and he wanted to have the opportunity to affect other players and other talents by moving, the Dallas Texans brand around.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the kind of thing that if you don't have the right people involved within this organization, I mean, it's something that just unfortunately doesn't work out. And I think in that time, of course, with the cultural shift of, you know, there being a lot of parental involvement, like you talked about. Yeah, I mean, just something that's interesting, and it shows you how culture diffuses across the United States in different areas, depending on what kind of sports that they are. But regardless, yeah, I mean, and like you said, I mean, build your confidence, but build your confidence in a way that I think allowed you to be able to have other youth roles in other areas where you knew, okay, you going into a different area where you knew nothing about the profile. I mean, not nothing, but the profiles and the culture of this Western Texas area is very new to you. And I think it set the tone really for a lot of the more advanced experiences you'd be able to have.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, coming back to North Carolina and then starting with Castle, Capital Area Soccer League, then if I hadn't had experience and built confidence to kind of know what I was talking about, at least, to run a training session, to run a team throughout a year, then I don't think those opportunities would happen. And again, I had some really good people that looked out for me, while I was a young coach and a young person as well, and just trying to be professional and trying to get mature as you get older and do it in a way that's a positive way. So that definitely carried me to the next step of coming back to North Carolina. Started with Castle, and then from there, I just really tried to prove myself each year with whatever opportunity I was given. You're going to be the U11. coach, okay, you're going to do the best you can. You're going to, okay, now we want you to do the U13s and the older ones, and now we want you to oversee the boys classic division, and I'll start working with the academy program, kind of build that out. But it all came from being awarded opportunities from people that had trust in me, which I think is again what it comes down to for me was that there was enough people that were supportive and positive and allowed me to grow.
So, I mean, so that being said, with the support that you've been able to have from different coaches and other people that have been involved in NCFC, but also Cap, um, tell me about some of the systems that maybe you had to adapt to in terms of coaching again. And what I mean by that is sometimes I'll hear from college coaches or other youth coaches, and they'll talk about you having to always be on as a coach, always understanding the way to interact with players, understanding how your actions are going to have consequences in terms of how they relay information, how they relay body language to players. What do you think that learning experience was like for you, if there really was one? I mean, there's a lot of people that I know just have that naturally.
Yeah. Well, I think that, being put in different situations is something that for me, you had to grow. Like if all of a sudden you're running parent meetings, you're running staff meetings, where you have to be very clear as to what you're trying to communicate, and knowing that the most important thing to these people is their children, and having the idea that they're putting that trust into me and then trying to run things professionally and respect that. I think it forces you into a leadership role where you can develop and for me the best development was just stealing things from other people, learning and what I liked that the ways that certain people carried themselves or how they were able to communicate or whatever it was. So I think that was always important and it was stuff that I had not done previously, and I think the feeling that you always have to be on is accurate. But I do think that players, regardless of, in a different way, if it's a youth environment or if it's a professional environment, players appreciate honesty, and they appreciate things that are genuine and real. And that's like how we are at North Carolina FC now. I mean, we've been clear. We've been open communications about, the struggles that players are going through, that coaches are going through, any kind of issues that are off the field that are happening. We have a player that just got re-injured that's going to be out for a while, and immediately, it's support and how do we help because we know mentally they're going to be in a bad place. My mom passed away a month ago from a fight with breast cancer, and the whole team knew it, and we were able to kind of just have it as something we were openly communicating about. But I think that genuine kind of openness to players and then understanding what they're going through, players that are starting their families with us, getting married, having babies, maybe losing one of their parents or losing a loved one or whatever it is, I think that there's a unifying ability for teams and for our club. The aim is to have, a respect and love for kind of everybody that's involved in what we're doing and understand there's something bigger than the sport. But that we all want to be successful and have ambition, but we all want to do it kind of in a positive way and in an openness.
No, and it's so it's encouraging and it's refreshing to be able to hear that there are these kinds of, I mean, I think, I would even go as far to say that this club in itself is really a family organization based on how much that so many of you have seen in terms of these changes, but yet, I mean, the kinds of people in these roles that end up staying the same. I mean, you've been here for years on years, and I mean, I this is your seventh year,
This is, yeah, the seventh year as within the pro organization and fifth year as a head coach.
but I mean, because 7 years is not a very long time, but even just looking at the kinds of relation, I mean, looking at I'm trying to figure out how to articulate this, but this really does seem like from the outside in that it is a family, despite it not being a club that's been around for 30, 40 years of different generations, but still such a close-knit environment between players, coaches, front office staff, shared by that will to win.
Yeah. And again, I mean, it's my 20th year in the club, I think. in some capacity, one way or another, and that's just extremely rare. I don't meet too many other colleagues or guys that have been at the same place for that long. And so what that means to me is gratitude, and what that means to me is valuing it, and not taking it lightly, and not never trying to be complacent and trying to continue to go about building things the right way and approaching things the right way. And like I said, there's a lot of guys in our locker room, who there's an openness and a trust of, hey, coach, I need to go take care of this, or I've got an issue with this or whatever it is. And it's not just me, our entire staff, support staff as well as technical staff is like-minded in terms of support first and that kind of thing. And we have our moments like all groups, but I think the idea is that um, you can play professional soccer at a ton of different places. Let's make it mean more, for our club, and let's make the experience be more than just the wins and losses and that kind of thing.
And what I think has got to go in through that as well. I mean, it's not everything. It's not the whole piece of this journey, but winning does help with just easing some certain tensions at certain points. And I mean, having been in championship after the pandemic, back down to League One, like where the payroll and revenue maybe was a little bit in question, was towards the bottom of the league at one point, and then going to win the entire league in 23, back up to championship. I mean, there's been a lot of movement. I mean, how do you, having seen this journey, and then also, I mean, promotion relegation is coming very soon. This North Carolina team could very well be at Division One in the next 5 years. But I mean, having seen so much of this change between the USL in this club, I gotta imagine that a lot of this same um, rock quality, the same core principles have remained consistent in terms of just remaining together, being committed to each other, and understanding at least emotionally and on off the pitch and on and off the pitch about the ways these right processes to go about it.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, and I took this from Dave Sarachan, that um, the high is never too high and the lows is never too low, and believe in what you're doing and kind of stay the course. And, um, having seen the club kind of go from the different leagues we were in and kind of not having a true identity, and then going, okay, USL Championship 1920 with Dave when I had the opportunity to assist with him. And we were kind of close, good group and close to competitive. And then COVID kind of threw everything up in the air. But yeah, like you said, the progression of going down to League One, fighting through a couple years of financial uncertainty, um, and then recruiting a very good group in addition to some of the guys that we kept, having success in 23, like you said, that winning and it certainly helps in stabilizing things and cementing things as a positive and using that to build on. But I think it's been important in the club's history because the people that have been around and understand it, value it. Don't take it for granted. Like if you have a situation where you 2 years in a row you come in last in the league and you kind of almost knew that was going to be the case based on the budget or whatever, that can be difficult, and remembering those times when you're also having the good times so you don't get too ahead of yourself, I think is the right balance.
Yeah, and so I've got to ask, and excuse me for my ignorance maybe on how a lot of this ends up working out. I mean, you've got some teams that make the announcement of, oh, or will that will comment on, yes, we're going to be moving up in the league after this season, and even the expansion sides, they'll figure out whether they want to move into League One or Championship, depending on the kind of financial incentive or the financial investment that ends up coming in. But did the winning season in 23 have? I mean, how impactful was the championship winning season in 23 in terms of getting North Carolina back to championship? I mean, was there much of a conversation? I mean, again, this may be something that I'm digging too far into and
No, no,
something
no.
that,
I mean, the reality of it was, I mean, we won the championship after the club knew it was going back to USL Championship.
got it.
So it wasn't a true promotion, kind of thing where you win the league and
Yeah,
you get to move up and all that. But we built the roster in 23 with the idea that there was a strong chance that we would be returning to USL Championship in
got
24.
it.
And so we wanted to be competitive on the field in 23, and obviously that won us a trophy and had success there. But we wanted there to be a bulk of players that we felt could also compete at the championship level, and we'd
Right.
be excited to take them into the roster in 24. And I think the way that it worked was when our owner decided to move from championship to League One initially, I think it was always with the idea that we'd be going back to championship. It was just a matter of when. And I think he was able to kind of be the one guiding that process, and obviously the good relationship with USL, that respected what our club was trying to accomplish and was able to support us kind of going to League One and coming back to championship. And yeah, like you said, promotion relegation around the corner, and our club certainly has ambition to move into the highest division that we can and grow. So it's going to be continued positive relationship with USL, and we'll see where it takes us.
Oh, huge. And I mean, yeah, I gotta imagine, even just as a player wanting to come into this kind of organization, it becomes so attractive just having the conversations with players and conversations with coaches about where this club has been, but then also how much has just stayed the same. And this goes back to what you're saying about, I think, just the theme of this conversation, just about people and the relationships that have been forged at this club. For that kind of recruiting conversation, even in 23, when maybe you can't say certain things to players, but you're still trying to convince them to come on and be able to compete in this North Carolina squad. But even also now, when you've got to be able to have these conversations with these longer term pros who are looking for their next move. I mean, what do you tell a player that's considering North Carolina, has other options, but this is a guy that you really end up seeing fit well in NCFC?
Yeah, I think we're just honest, and sometimes, somebody's got more money than we do, or they can see themselves as a bigger role, having a bigger role at a different club, and sometimes that goes that way. But I think when we're going after players, we're presenting them a detailed and thought out idea as to what the club is trying to accomplish and how we see, the growth for that individual player. But we have to be honest about exactly what it is, and when we say we're a club that promotes youth and connection with that. I have a Zoom call with pretty much every person that we've signed prior to signing them, just to connect and see, what questions they may have, but also just to be very clear as to this is what our club is about. This is what we're going to be looking like. We want to be as competitive as possible. There's going to be young players in our training environment, and some experienced pros may say, I've been there, done that. That's not for me, and no problem. But I think for us, it's just, this is who we are. This is how we think you could fit in a positive way, and then just really trying to connect to players to allow them to understand kind of the off-field things that we're very fortunate to have at the club. We're blessed with great facilities, and even more so trying to improve those facilities as time goes on. But good supportive club in a strong area of the country, that's not too high on financial needs for living in our area and everything. But all the stuff that kind of goes into it, and then also learning what the player's ambition is. Like what is it they want to achieve? What is it that drives them, on and off the field, and what is family situation like, and how can we help and that kind of stuff. And I think to a lot of our players, our family oriented idea, knowing that my kids will be around the games, my wife will be around, our staff's families will be around, and we also want to have interaction with players, partners, and whoever's there at the game, and that kind of stuff, and be supportive of kind of this growth. I think it shows. A professional player who's thinking about not just soccer things. There's more to it.
Yeah, well, completely. And I've got to imagine a lot of this perspective also comes with the role of being a sporting director as well. First ever sporting director in NCFC history, at least based on the press release. I got to imagine that there were people at least in those roles and having those conversations. But sporting director and head coach. I mean, a lot of times you do see people that are able to juggle those two roles, but a lot of it, I mean, at least in other clubs or on other levels, it's separate.
Yeah.
Um, you know what has that combination of roles, combination of responsibilities done for you as, growth as a coach, but also in the development of this club as well? I mean, I think another part of this though too is the connection between first team and academy players. It's something that you've strengthened. And if I had to bet, that was another part right on your agenda every year after year.
Yeah, it's always assessing that component and how can we get better. How does our staff get better in our academy program? I've kind of moved. I still work with on the youth side in the academy, but more as an advisor and more of a connecting type thing between the first team and the academy program. And Daniel Saletti is now our academy director. And Christopher Harrington is also working in the academy. But these guys also are coming into first team trainings, and they're seeing our environment. They're on the bench for home games when they can make it. And Stephen Palmer's with the goalkeeper with the academy and with the club. He's been with us in with us this week with Mike McGinty, who's been away for a few days. But anyway, there's this intertwined feeling of how do we continuously figure out the best way to connect and show our players and families what this pathway means and kind of how unique and special it is, and how positive we all think about it. And I think, when I think of the sporting director responsibilities, I mean, there's several. We don't have a GM and we don't have a president, on the men's side, that's in the day-to-day, player signings, player recruitment, that kind of stuff. And so I'm kind of doing all of those responsibilities as well, which I've done since I've been with the pro side of player recruitment and player contracts and signings and that kind of stuff. But inherently, what that does is it helps shape the direction of what our club is trying to achieve. So in 21 and 22, we're very much geared as a youth development and opportunity for players, even pro players that have been at different clubs to come into our club and have support, have development, and then see what happens. Then in 23, it becomes very much more competitive. We want to win a championship, but we also want to do it. We started Nick Holiday in the goal until he unfortunately broke his foot that year. But we were, having a championship level season with a 16 and 17-year-old in the goal in professional games, and so there was this balance of, okay, we're a little bit more competitive, but we're certainly still driven in terms of youth development. Last year, after I was named sporting director, we were very fortunate to recruit a few players from around the country that had left MLS academies and come to us, and then we had our first kind of significant moves. One with Julian Palacios, who played for us for the first 11 games last year.
Mhm.
And then we transferred Hooli to Westerlo in Belgium and was the first, financially gained transfer that the club had sent to Europe, and done that. Adrian Palaio was another youth talent that had come from Portland, and he had signed with us and played kind of the first half of the season as well, and then transferred him to Chivas, and it was the first time that the club had transferred a youth player to Liga MX, and so player movements, player contracts, the direction of kind of what the men's team is trying to do at our club are all things that I'm very invested in and very fortunate to be a part of what we're doing. But yeah, it's been a growth of opportunity of doing things that I had not done, and then as I'm doing them, how do you get better at what those things are? And I think it's unique again because if I'm the one that's having the conversations with the players initially about signing, negotiating a contract, and then managing the group on a day-to-day basis, while having one eye on, okay, we want to develop these young talents because we're going to be able to move them to Europe or whatever it is. But at the same time, I want to be fair to everybody that's within the group, and we want to be successful. I think it's just a unique opportunity to blend all those components together, and it works at our club now. I certainly understand why they have separate roles at other clubs where there's a sporting director, there's a GM, there's a head coach. Um, but for us, it seems to be working, and I think we've had the ability to kind of um, show some agility in terms of how our club has been in different leagues or different whatever it is, and had different ambitions over time, because we've been able to be kind of fluid with that. So
Yeah, I completely agree. I think when you're able to marry these two parts of roles that traditionally are separate, and like you said, you can understand why, just how spread thin that you are sometimes. But I mean, you're always a voice in that conversation, like I mean, and you took the words right out of my mouth when you talked about you being a voice always in player progression. On the head coaching side and also on the sporting side, I mean, you're someone, you and the rest of your staff, I mean, is always someone that these younger players can end up having the conversations with and know exactly really where they stand.
yeah, definitely. And we've also tried to make that same progression of players into coaching as well. We've got Paco Craig and Rodrigo da Costa this year that are obviously professional players with the first team, but they're also coaching in the academy. And taking time to start earning their licenses and opportunities because they want to continue in the game once they're done playing, whenever that is, hopefully in many years. Pekka is an assistant coach that I have on the first team now, and he was a player for the last 4 years, when I was part of the team. But Pekka was an individual that we had a very detailed plan of, okay, we want you to be involved in coaching the academy. We want you to have more responsibility in terms of the coaching. And then at the end of the last year or year before last, when he retired from playing, he was able to move straight into being an assistant coach on the pro side. And now he's played with some of the guys that he's coaching. But I think it shows the same development course that we want to have for our players. They see within the club structure overall as they see former teammates going into coaching, and us trying to help prepare players for whatever is going to be next, and intertwine that as well. And if you're an academy player and you're doing your own thing and you kind of think you're in your silo, but then you have this professional player who's coming out and working with you in addition and giving experiences and little nuances of the game that maybe your regular team coach doesn't, or just that added detail. I think it helps grow that connection between the academy and the first team, and see what it is, that again we feel is very unique at our club, and a great thing.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, I completely agree. Another sector of this though too, I think is also the not only within the men's um I was going to say silo, but silo is not even the right word about this. I mean, it's really really just a field of everything that goes on, at least within this organization. But you touched on briefly about the Courage, the North Carolina Courage, and how that's always, you guys are always showing out to, at least on your family end of being able to watch those matches. Tell me about that relationship between these two clubs, and I mean, really the role that they're really playing in growing professional soccer in North Carolina.
Yeah, I mean, a huge advocate for the Courage, and tons of respect for the players and the staff and everything they do. And there's also just, again, goes back to the intertwined kind of relationships. Sean Nahas is the head coach of the Courage, and he had a very similar path that I did, where we both started in the club. I think he was a year before I was, way back when, and had kind of had this very similar progression of being able to work. I was on the boys' side, he was on the girls' side. Um, we were each academy directors for many years. We shared an office for 12 years in the in the youth office. And so, we both kind of got to this situation where we were the head coaches of the pro teams and the clubs that we had basically developed in ourselves and grown up in ourselves. And so immense respect for Sean and, his older brother Damon, who just won a national championship at UNC and as the women's head coach there. And Damon was another guy that really helped when I joined the club way back when. Damon and Sean and I were all coaching together at U11 and U12 back in 2003 or whatever it was, 2005 maybe. But anyway, just these relationships and this kind of support. And then if you go through the staff, Nathan Thackeray, who was with us in the boys academy and the youth side and was an overall goalkeeper on the youth side, now with NC Courage fully. Tom Harris, Paul Forster. It's a very similar thing to the men's side, where there's a lot of intertwined from the youth and the pro. Um, and they do a great job, of getting like-minded, I think, players to come into a culture that they've created, and to be able to go from there. Um, Vic Boardman is one that I just did my pro lessons with this past year. She's an assistant coach on the Courage, and just learning from her, and just what they're creating over there. It's fascinating, and I find myself very fortunate to be able to, drive into work this morning to go to training. And as we're getting set up, the Courage is 2 fields over, they're getting set up. And sometimes when our paths cross, and being able to talk shop a little bit, and what are they working on, and what training sessions, kind of ideas do they have, and what different equipment are they using, and this and that. It could go on and on. But I think it's just a unique thing that for our area and for our club, you've got a top women's team that's, I was reading today, that has another new investor, and just continuing to drive the sport and to drive things forward. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, top class organizations, and I mean, yeah, just continuing just the ability to be able to continue to grow soccer, not only in this area, but I mean, I think there's a mutual relationship between these two clubs, and I won't say for certain, but just looking at two top organizations within their respective leagues. I mean, there's a lot of things that both these clubs can learn from each other, like you're saying. I mean, on the personal level with coaching and um, what ends up going into player and personal development, it's a similar thing on both sides. I think it's definitely a mutual relationship, it seems like, of just just both being able to serve benefit.
Yeah, I definitely think so, and obviously for my family, it's very close to home because I've got a son who loves the game and loves to play and loves to be a part of it, and then my two daughters who look up to the Courage players and are fortunate to have professional women's soccer in their area and be able to watch games and that kind of stuff. It's to the point where the my youngest will for years now will is it Tuesday, is it Wednesday, what Champions League game is on?
Right.
Like she's into it. And I think that doesn't happen if it's not cultivated by the fact that there's professional soccer in the area and things for these young people to go and experience.
Yeah. I mean, just to talk about one other little thing though too, I know um I believe it was the end of it because they're undergoing other expansion efforts. And I mean, I was following the journey of Cleveland Pro Soccer, how they were making that push to be able to get a professional women's team out into that area. An area that doesn't really have pro soccer, at all. The bid didn't end up going over to Cleveland. I think it went to Denver. It was the 14th spot, but I mean, that's still a movement that very much is alive, and they're furthering really exactly that for younger girls and younger players to be able to look up to a top flight women's team. And I think it's just so important.
Yeah, well, and I think you see that, the more teams that are coming in are trying to find ways to have both men's and women's sports together and be able to appeal to everybody. And yeah, I think the growth of soccer in our country and the opportunities that more professional organizations are popping up. There's more investment. There's more support. I just think it's a great movement and great moment. Obviously, leading into the World Cup next year and how this will continue to evolve in our country is fascinating.
Coach, I mean, it's been a pleasure to be able to talk with you about all of this. I've loved learning about your journey. I've loved learning more and more about North Carolina Football Club, and I'm all out of everything that I had written down, but I don't want to cut it too short. If there's anything else that you want to put out there to anyone who's going to be watching this, maybe any NCFC fans, anyone, former players who maybe tune, we got a lot of college guys who are watching this, so maybe guys who are looking to play for NCSC in the future, but. I mean, any parting words for our viewers, Coach?
Yeah, I mean, I think just believing in yourself and just putting the work in, and that can apply to whatever situation. If it's a college player that wants to be a professional, and wants to continue their career and their journey, or if it's a coach that's coaching at a certain younger age group or a different level, but wants to achieve something there, there's no replacement for believing in yourself, learning from others, and then doing everything you can extra. Show up for the extra training session as a player, show up for an extra training session as a coach to learn something from somebody else, and just kind of make yourself um, valuable. Find the value that you could go for, and to keep going. But yeah, I really appreciate the opportunity to come on and just talk about the sport and talk about our club, which are easy things for me to do. So thank you for having me on.
Of course, Coach Bradford, it's been a pleasure, and you've got a supporter in me and the rest of us who work at Kickball for as long as your career may go for the the 30 years that we've got to come. Of
I appreciate that very much.
course, all the best to you.